This is Tell Your Story Alaska. We talk aviation, history, theology, but most of all, the raw stories of Alaskans and the gospel. Welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story Alaska. Today is, I said this in the last episode, so I can't say it in every episode, but it is a little bit different because this is a very spontaneous episode. I don't have notes, I didn't plan it, I'm just going to talk, mainly because yesterday I took a flight to Soldotna, and some very interesting things happened on this flight, and I just wanted to share it with you. And aviation stories are always interesting, especially for other pilots. We exchange stories because it's fun, but we can also learn from each other. And I do think there were some things to be learned from yesterday's flight to Soldotna. Now, if I haven't mentioned already, I live in the Big Lake, Alaska area, and my airplane's parked at Big Lake Airport. And so a friend of mine called me up and he asked me to fly him down to Soldotna. Now, Soldotna is the base of, it's down on the Kenai Peninsula, and it's the base for MARC, which is a aircraft maintenance shop. And he had some work done there, and his plane had been parked there for some time, waiting to be flown back home to Big Lake. So he and I hopped in my MAL M5 and we flew over there. Now there's some choices when you fly down to the Kenai. You can fly over the water or you can fly around the east side of Anchorage, and we opted to fly around Anchorage, which is a little bit longer, not that much longer, but you don't have to fly over water. And if you imagine if you're in an airplane with wheels, flying over water that's, right at near freezing temperatures, it's just not very appealing thought for me, so we opted to fly around Anchorage. So to fly around Anchorage, you have to avoid the airspace, and when you give plenty of space to the airspace, because you want to give a wide girth there because there's a lot of traffic coming in and out, the airliners and such. There's also a military base and some other airports in the Anchorage area, so we like to give plenty of space when we're flying around that area. So we opted to go up to about 6,000 feet, and which takes us over the mountains there, just east of Anchorage. And it really makes for a gorgeous flight, which is another appealing fact about that route is the sights. And I had actually just purchased a GoPro camera, and it can do like a 360-degree view. And going over the mountains it would make this stunning video. I haven't used the camera yet, and I wanted to test it. So anyway, we took my MAL up, and we took off. Everything was very uneventful on the flight over, and we landed successfully in Soldotna, and also got some really great footage. And maybe one day I'll add, video to the podcast. I've been resisting that because I'm not super techie, but it is beautiful video flying over the Alaska ranges with a good camera. But anyway, we landed in Soldotna, and we were able to pick up his plane. And I need to compliment MARC, the maintenance shop there. They did excellent work on my friend's Cherokee 6, and they were very kind to us, offering us food and coffee and chatting with us. And they invited us to a safety conference coming up next week, and we plan on going. And by the way, the friend is my friend Jeff Kirsch. He was in a previous episode called Flying Among the Wildfires. If you haven't had a chance, you should listen to that. It was our flying last summer over the widespread wildfires from last year. And so, we really hope that doesn't happen again this summer. We're hoping for minimal wildfires because that wasn't fun navigating, flying through the smoke. Well, after picking up his airplane, I need to mention first, when we landed in Soldotna, the airport has this little gravel runway. So you got the main paved runway, and right on the side there's a little gravel runway. And I always like landing on the gravel because I have bush tires on my MAL, and it's easier on the tires. But I landed there, no problems. It was pretty breezy, so it was had to do some crosswind techniques, but landed fine. And but there was the taxiway to get off of the gravel runway there was a snow berm there, so there was like a barrier of snow that hadn't been plowed away, and so we turned around and taxied to the other end of the runway where there was another taxiway, and there was also a snow berm. So we were kind of like trapped on this little gravel runway, and so I thought about just trying to plow through the berm, like it looked doable, but when you're flying an airplane worth more than $100,000, you just don't take chances like that. So I just took off and went around and landed on the pavement, which I don't like with my bush tires, but it's better than ruining it on a snow berm. So, it's one of those, there's so many things in aviation. You think, oh, it's just a routine flight. You land somewhere, but there's so many factors that you just don't even anticipate, like a snow berm being an issue. You can fly across the state and mountain ranges, and then you get taken out by a little snow berm. There's always like these little unexpected things and little decisions you have to make in aviation, and that's where the stories come from. But the snow berm was not the story I wanted to tell. The one I wanted to tell was on our flight back from Soldotna to Big Lake. Now, Jeff had picked up his airplane. We flew together in my mall, and then he had hopped in his plane, and I hopped in mine. Now we're going to fly back to Big Lake together. So we took off, and we usually like to find a private radio station so we can just chat while we're flying along. And we don't get too close to each other, but we fly together nonetheless, and try to take pictures of each other, try to have fun with it. But we were most of the way back towards Big Lake, and I was coming around the north side of Anchorage, and that's when from the top of the mountain range there, it's when I began my descent towards Big Lake, flying right over Birchwood there. I was about 6,000 feet, and I was starting to descend, and I think I was down to about 4,000 feet or so when two fighter jets just flew right in front of my airplane. Now, when I told my wife this story, she asked, well, how close were they? I have a really hard time judging that, but I would say they were about a quarter mile in front of me, which is, it just seems really, really close. I know maybe that sounds sort of far, but in aviation land, like that's really, really close. You think about a couple thousand feet or so. I could actually see the heads of the pilots, and these were like I'm not familiar with military fighter planes, but like these were just like the ones from Top Gun, and I could see the pilots in there with their helmets. I mean, if the guy took his helmet off, it was like it would be Tom Cruise's face, from Top Gun. So right in front of me, these jets just zoomed right in front of me. It's very surreal because I've seen the Top Gun movies, and with all the CGs, special effects, we're used to seeing images like fighter planes flying by right in front of the camera. But when it's real and a fighter jet is flying right in front of me, knowing that there's going to be wake behind the plane and visually seeing how fast they were going was visually stunning, but also really, really frightening because they were at the same altitude as I was. And so I didn't know if there were more planes coming. And so I pushed the nose down as far as I could. Now, generally, when I do a descent, I try to keep it under 500 feet a minute or less. I usually try to do even less because a gentle descent is easy on the ears. I have sensitive ears when it comes to pressure changes. Like I can't scuba dive because my ears don't pop. And so if I descend too quickly, it actually is hard on my ears. And so I usually begin my descent pretty far back from my destination. So I have a nice long, gentle descent. That's how I normally do it. But in this case, two fighter jets had just flown over my nose and at the same altitude as me. And so I pressed the yoke forward as far as it would go to get me down. Because if there were more behind them, then I could get under them because I was still flying forward towards their flight path. So I dove the airplane down, and sure enough, there was another fighter jet behind them. And the first ones were about a quarter mile away. The second fighter jet was even closer. If the guy had taken his helmet off, I could probably see the whites of his eyes. It was that close. It freaked me out. So I dove my airplane down even more, and I was in a very sharp descent trying to avoid the flight path of these planes. Fortunately, there was no other jets behind that one. There was 3 total, but that I was not expecting that, and it happened so quickly. It was all of a sudden they were just there, and then the second one came, and it was a bit of a shock. And I just in aviation, when things happen, when an accident happens, it happens very, very quickly. When I read reports or watch videos about accidents, which I do so I can learn from them, almost always they just kind of, people get into a situation they didn't mean to, and then it happens very quickly. But usually the leading up to it is very slow. So in this case, there was no lead up to it. It was suddenly these planes were in front of me, and there was not much I could do. My only hope is that those guys had me on their radar, because I do have ADS-B out, and they should be able to see me. And which, if it is the case, I am surprised at how close they got to me, even if they saw me on their screens. So anyway, that was the first thing that happened on that flight. The second thing that happened was I was around 4,000 feet at that point, and Big Lake was pretty close, only about 10 miles away. And so I knew I was going to have to get down, I was going to have to do a steeper descent than normal, and also I was going to do a wide girth, so like a wide turn around Big Lake to give me space to get down so I can land. So I did that. I did 500 feet a minute and just kind of drifted towards the south, which is sort of no man's land near Mackenzie Point, just to give myself space to descend. So I did that, and I'm tuned into the Big Lake traffic, and I can hear that there's a couple of planes in the pattern there. And so as I got down to about 1,500 feet, I started flying towards Big Lake, and I started making my calls. Well, on the radio at the time, there was a woman in traffic pattern. She was set up for a left base for 07. Now, Big Lake, the runway is 0725, so it's one runway, 2 different directions. One runway is 07, the other one is 25. The winds were favoring 25, and so I was setting myself up to do a left traffic pattern for 25. Now, there was a woman on the radio who was in a left traffic pattern for 07, which I thought was a little odd, because the winds were favoring 25, but it's not so unusual that there was any concern. There is a RNAV approach for 07, and a lot of people shoot that, but it didn't appear that she was shooting that approach. It appeared that she was just in regular VFR left traffic pattern. So she was trying to land on the runway the winds were not favoring. So first tiny red flag that maybe there's someone here that had less experience, but really not that big of a deal though. So I made an announcement that I was entering a left downwind for runway 25, and she had announced that she was in a left downwind for 07. In other words, we were setting ourselves up to land on the same runway towards each other, as if we would bump into each other head to head. However, she was ahead of me in the traffic pattern while I was just entering downwind. She was near to the base turn, which means she was further along in the pattern, so she would have landed first. So I told her on the radio, you land first, I'll be number 2. And she said, okay. So I'm in left base, and someone else crackles up on the radio and says, I'm holding short runway 25, ready for departure. I will wait for landing traffic. And so I looked down at the runway, and sure enough, there was I think it was a Cessna 206 lined up on runway 25, she was off the runway, holding short, getting ready to take off. But he was aware that there were 2 planes landing. And so when he announced that, the woman who was landing on 07 got on, and she said, well, you can take off real quick if you'd like. I'll wait for you. And the man on the ground said, okay, I think I'll do that. And so presumably she would kind of extend her downwind leg, or, just do a 360 or do something to stay out of the way so he could take off. So from my perspective, I could see him. He came out and started his ground roll to take off, and all of a sudden he aborted his takeoff. He slammed on the brakes, cut the power, and he turned around and taxied back to the hold short position. And I thought that was really odd. But then I looked over and I could see her. She was on short final. She told him he could go. Presumably she would get out of the way so he could go, but she didn't. She turned onto a final approach. So she said, "Go ahead and take off," and then she turned into a position on the path that he was about to take for takeoff, but she was landing, right? So this could have been a disastrous head-on air collision if he had not noticed her coming in for a landing. And of course, that's a very dangerous situation. So what this woman did was extremely dangerous, and I'm thankful that man was able to abort his takeoff. So I was in a downwind for 2.5, and I knew that she was landing. The other man is now holding short, waiting for her to land. She did not say what her intentions were. Perhaps this was a mistake on my part, but I made a presumption that she was landing and she would stop and get off the runway. But as I turned base and then turning final, and I made announcements so everyone would know exactly where I was, knowing that there was a lot of traffic. As I turned final, and it was a longer final because I extended my downwind, but she decided to do a touch and go, or maybe her landing didn't go very well, and she decided to go around. So she was taking off. So now I'm head to head with her. I'm coming in for a landing and she is taking off. So here's a second situation where she has set up a circumstance where she's going head to head with someone. Now I saw her, I asked her, did you just take off? And she got on and she was sort of apologetic. She said, yeah, sorry, I'm going to turn out of the way. And she did. I could see her plane turn quickly out of the way right after she got liftoff. So I could see her getting out of the way. And then I was able to land. And then the 206 that was very impatiently waiting, you can tell by the tone of his voice, then took off. And so that's what happened on my flight yesterday. It was all potentially hazardous. Thank God nothing happened. It ended up being uneventful, but 2 times with the fighter jets flying across my nose and then coming in, and this woman kind of botching her communications and her pattern work was very potentially hazardous. So just a couple of lessons I learned. One is you absolutely must keep your head on a swivel. You cannot always just rely on your ADS-B traffic information. There's a lot of airplanes out there that do not show up on your ADS-B for-flight screen or whatever you might have. But also, I suspect that this woman that was in the traffic pattern felt a little bit in over her head. Maybe she's a student pilot. I don't really know, but there was just the sound of her voice. There was a sense that she was in over her head. She made a decision while she was in the traffic pattern to let an aircraft on the ground to take off before she was going to enter final approach. So she gave him permission to do that, and then she entered final approach, which is a massive mistake. And what I believe happened is she was feeling overwhelmed, maybe a student pilot, and she was in over her head. When you are in over your head, you cannot think straight. You might say something to appease, or you say it and then you're not computing everything that you've just done, and you end up making mistakes. So the lesson learned here is, and I think of this for myself too, because I can be in situations where I'm in over my head, even though I have a fair amount of experience. But you absolutely, if you have that sense you're in over your head, you're overwhelmed, you have to get yourself into a situation, get out of that situation. Just fly away, say I'm exiting the pattern area, go to no man's land, and just recollect yourself, because you're not in a good state of mind to make good decisions. So you ever get in over your head, get out and reset. Never try to save a bad situation. Just get out of it, turn around, whatever it is you got to do. It's always worth it so you can fly another day. All right, well, that was a short episode today. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my flight yesterday and a couple of things that I learned, especially as flying season is gearing up. It's getting more and more busy the more time passes as we're getting more requests for flights. Primarily, we will be flying for Keiko Retreat Center and Cochrane Hills Bible Camp, and there's going to be some other flying. I've also signed up for what's called a flying clinic. A friend of mine who owns a business called God's Country Aviation, his name is Isaac, and he's a very talented mall pilot, and my airplane happens to be a mall. I decided to take his flying clinic so that I can learn how to optimize the performance out of my plane and to be a safer pilot. I've also been watching a lot of YouTube videos about NTSB reports and that diagnose how an accident came to be. I've really enjoyed engaging with this to learn from other people's mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes myself, and I've had inner debates about recording an episode about my mistakes that I've learned from. It's kind of a pride thing. People don't want to admit their mistakes, but I see so much value in telling people about your mistakes so that they can learn from it. You don't want others to make the same mistake. So yeah, when I humble myself, I will probably come out and do that, tell you about all my worst mistakes. So hey guys, fly safe, blue skies, enjoy flying in Alaska this summer. If you are not in Alaska and you just enjoy listening, thank you for listening in, and we will see you next time. If you have a story that you would like told, please contact me at tysalaska@gmail.com, tysalaska@gmail.com.